Hey, what's up guys? This is Nuno, and in this tutorial I'll guide you through the process of creating a stunning exterior visualization using the latest version of Lumion, Lumion 2023. We will cover everything from scene preparation and composition to materials, lighting, scene dressing and render effects. Plus, we will explore how to add real photos of people inside your 3D renders for an added touch of realism. So let's get into it. And so let's start with part 1, scene preparation. I got my scene from Evermotion, and this Evermotion is a website where you can download many 3D models. Either it's completely interior scenes or exteriors, or vegetation assets, cars, all of that. And so I got mine from this bundle. It's Arch Exteriors Volume 38. And this one, if you see here, the scene 10, so you can see this scene. And the great part about this comes, I think it's with V-Ray, prepared for V-Ray, and it's a max scene. It comes with all the textures, right? So we have all the textures here already applied. But if we do import this directly from Max into Lumion, we will not have all the textures all set. So what I'm using here, it's Lime Exporter, okay? So this Lime Exporter, I already talked about Lime Exporter in my channel multiple times, but it allows you to export all the files from 3ds Max into FBX, for example, with all the textures already applied. And in the previous versions of Lumion, the normal map was not working correctly, but now in the new Lumion, it already exports with the normal map correctly, which is a big plus. And it's not only that, it also allows you to export into groups and all of that. So this is the scene here. I already made some cleanup. This scene is quite heavy, and so with Lime Exporter, it only allows you to export with a maximum file size of 800 mega, and you need to divide this into several different groups to be able to export into smaller file sizes. And to do this, you'll go here, Lime Exporter, and so you can see that this has several features here. You can decide which version you want it to export, you can decide which maps, and you can create the groups here inside Lime Exporter. So basically, what I did is that I selected a couple of houses. So, for example, this is one group, right? This is another, and this is another. And when I want to create a group, I just click here, Group Creation, and click Group. I give it a name. So let's say this is 38, let's say Part 1. And I press OK. And then you can create several groups, and when you are done with it, you can go here, Export Options, and you see Export Single File. So this is not what we want because we have different groups. So we need the Export Files by Group, okay? And we don't want this either. We don't want to check the center to origin, because this way it will create a pivot point all in the origin, and we don't want this because we want to keep everything in the same place as it is. So let's uncheck this. And then we just click here, whole scene, and it will ask you a name for this export, and you just press OK, and it will start the export. And after that, it will ask you to download the file, and that's it. Then after it downloads, you'll have a folder with all the files. So I have here actually several folders that I imported into Lumion. So I have an interior, I have the river, so I have everything here that I separated, I have into an FBX file. And so now let's open Lumion and let's see how we can do this now. We can import correctly all the files inside Lumion. So I have here on my imported models, so I have the floor separated. This is the interior floor actually. We have the vases and the street. So you can simply just place all of them like this. Don't worry about the position for now. So when you have all your models, you can simply click Control on the keyboard and left click to select all the objects. And then you'll see here one that says Align Positions on the right top. You see Align Positions. So you click it and it automatically will place everything into place. We don't see here the river because we need to actually move this up. Okay. Now we see all our scene. Everything is in correct place. Of course, we need to fix a couple of things here. We don't have everything set, especially here on this one. This was just to show you how you can import objects with Lime Exporter and export, of course. And I'm now going to open the scene so I can show you everything that I did to achieve that result. So first thing, composition. We need to go here to the photo mode. And here what I did is, let me just set my camera. You can disable all the effects here on the right top. If you think that this is too slow, just to kind of set up your camera, this will help you out. So you don't need to see all the effects just for the camera. So we can disable here. And now you can see that I'm using a 24mm camera lens. So I don't want something too wide, but at the same time I don't want something too close because it's a street scene, you know, so you want to capture a significant amount of details. So I think this 24mm, it's a good one. And then 1.8, the camera height. And you can set this up just by right click, and you can move around with the arrow keys to set up the camera. And you can notice that this is already with some bars here. So it will be a vertical shot, because in Lumion now, in the new Lumion 2023, you have this option to flip aspect ratio. So you can either change it to vertical or horizontal. And I changed the aspect ratio to 4:5. And also you have now this adding, because before you just move with a right mouse click, you try to adjust the camera. But now you also have here that gives you a little bit more precision, because you can, with the shift key and the left click, you can really make this precise movement and define exactly how you want your camera. And so in my case, I set this camera because I think it's we have some nice lines here going to this area where it kind of leads your view to this area here. And I think this is a nice composition for this scene. Let me activate back here the effects, because I want to show you that one important effect is the 2-point perspective. You should also use this because it makes your vertical line straight. As you can see, you see that the buildings, all the vertical lines now are straight, and makes the composition much more pleasing. And so this was for the composition part. So now let's move to the part 3 of this scene breakdown, which is materials. Let's go here to build mode actually. As I mentioned before, many of these materials already come with the scene from Evermotion. Lime Exporter exports all the materials already in the FBX file. So the majority of the materials, you don't need to do actually many things. You just go here and let's say it's this one. And by the way, another thing that about Lumion 2023 is that if you want to really see the materials, you can just double click or click here on settings. So if I double click, you'll see that it opens the settings. So now you have these two tabs, something to pay attention, because if you are used to the old Lumion, you might click here and you're thinking, where is my material? But it's here on the settings. A lot of these scenes from Evermotions, they use real photos or real textures, and so that's why you get all of these little details. You see all of these details in the facade, all of this dirt, you know, all of these small details that otherwise you'll have to do this with decals. In this case, it's much faster, you know, because you just have one big texture, and here it works quite well. So you have the normal map, and we have the glossiness and the reflection. And so since I have these maps, I leave this at 100% because this way it's taking into account all of these maps. But if I feel that this is still too reflective, you can still adjust. You see, you can still adjust all of these properties. So for example, this floor, I actually changed something here. Let me show you. So I increased a little bit the roughness. It has a little bit less shininess in the floor. I think it was way too glossiness, this floor. And the reflectivity as well, I decreased a little bit because you see if I start increasing, I think it's way too reflective. You might like it, but for this scene, I think it was better to leave it a little bit less. And then this texture, I just decreased a little bit here, this texture, because when you are decreasing, if you have it to 100%, it's taking into account the full texture, okay? So it's just taking into account this color of the texture. If you start decreasing at about 50%, it will take this, it will blend the color that you have here, okay? So let's say that I have here a red color. So you see it's blending the color, but if you keep decreasing, it will be just one color. You see, it will make it even more pronounced, this color. This is great because you can still adjust here some parameters about the color if you think that it's still not right there, you know. But For sure, it's not red. So let's maybe make it 90%. And another property that you can now use is on the settings on the bottom, you have text saturation. So if you decrease, well, this one you'll not notice much, but let's see on this chair, for example. If I decrease, you see that it becomes black and white because I reduce all the saturation of the texture. So it's something that actually is quite useful as well to have. And then I think I had it here. Yeah, I added some weathering. I actually have silver because I thought it was the one that looked better, but you can do any type of weathering here and see how it looks. And this has displacement, as you can see. If you increase all the way to 100, well, I think it's way too pronounced. And you have a lot of distortion as well. So you can just adjust slightly. So you have these stones, so they are with some depth here, but not too much until it doesn't get distorted. So I think something like this is fine. Okay. And other thing, this area here, it has the subsurface scattering. So this subsurface scattering currently in Lumion 2023, they are still working on it. It's not perfect for the ray tracing version. And so what I suggested to do is to keep it a low value, and as well a color that it's darker. You know, if you use light colors here, it will not look good. So just use darker colors and at a very low value, maximum 5%. It's enough. Okay. And so I imported here this texture and I left it everything as it is. Okay. And so this will reflect some of the light. We'll see on the ray tracing that this will reflect a lot of the green light here to the facade. So it's quite nice. It's one of the advantages with the ray tracing now. And other thing, I have here some vegetation, which again, I just have, you see, a very dark green color, and 1% it's enough, because more than this, it will look bad. So always pay attention to that. When they do release the update, because they are updating now more constantly with the new version, and you can see on their new product roadmap that one of the things that are in development, if I look here, it's the subsurface scattering for ray tracing. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that this will be one of the future updates that they will release. And for now, take into account what I said about the dark color and the low value. Another thing about the material is the glass. The glass, I think it will be one of the future updates for ray tracing because it's not working properly. The glass shader, the typical glass shader that you have in Lumion, it's not working quite well. So we need to do some work around. And so this material, it's like this: metalness all the way up, reflectivity all the way up, no roughness, and opacity at about 40%. Depends on the end result that you like. And then this slider all the way to 0, and I just add a slightly blue color to it, just slightly, because I want to enhance the reflection of the sky. And basically that's it for my glass shader here. And I'm using the same on this facade here as well. So it's the same one. And so now let's move to part 4, lighting. And lighting in this scene, I'm using the real skies. And let me show you here. If I go to photo and real skies, I'm using the one from the clear tab, the first one. And I set it up in a position that I have a little bit of a shadow here, this side, and this side on the light. So it gives like a continuation of this opening here. So as you can see, it gives this opening. And I think it helps a little bit with the composition. And I'll go more into details on the lighting in the render effects section. But for now, let me just show you another thing that I did here. I have here these fill lights. So I have here. I don't have any material for the water because the water is not visible. But I do have some lights here that they just act a little bit as, you know, fillers of light, like it's reflecting a little bit of the river, you know. This one here, it's for the river. So I just placed an area light and made it to point to this facade. And so you can see, if I increase all the way, how it looks, but I just want slightly this effect. And then I have another one here that it's enhancing the effect on these leaves. So I want to enhance a little bit the effect here. So if I increase all the way, I want to increase just a little bit here on the leaves to have like they are with some light here. So that's why I added these ones. And you know, even with ray tracing, sometimes you need to do a little bit of these tricks, like you add more lights, or you add light blockers. And light blockers would be, for example, if I don't want a specific area to enter light, I would add some like a black box here, for example, and then I create like an artificial shadow. So you don't need to focus just on the scene as it is. You can still build these things, the light fillers or the meshes for blocking light, to achieve the exact result that you want. And I have here on the inside of the cafe as well, I just put some point lights here. So we don't see them actually here, the lights, but from the exterior like this, we can see that it's turned on and it has some light inside. So that was the purpose of those interior lights. And one note about the real skies is that I have the real skies and I also have the sun. So in this sun, you see that if you look at the shadow here, you see that it changes just a little bit because I want to control the brightness, the sun brightness. And I can only achieve this with this effect on top of the real sky. So I need to have both. But I put in the exact same position so it doesn't look wrong, you know, it doesn't look like the real sky it's here, the sun, and then the sun will be around here. But to have this correctly, if you move it down, it will have no effect. You always need to move the sun effect on top of the real skies, okay? And next is scene dressing. Even though this scene, it's already quite detailed, there's already a lot of details like the tables, like the exterior, the patio scene, some of the vegetation on the pots. I think that it could still be improved. And what I did here, I added some extra plants to these pots, here and here. And you can see here on the balconies, I added some vegetation. It doesn't have the pots, but since it's from below, you don't really notice it, so it works well like this. I just made the vegetation, the flowers facing the camera, so it's a little bit more visible. I also added, this is from Lumion, on this wire here. This wire comes from the scene itself. I added the Italy flags, and I also added some hanging clothes here. So I added here. I added a lot of elements here, like the people. Okay, I added 3D people in this area, 3D people, and here further away, this is the to-do people. So this is billboards. So you can find them here, people 2D. So, and my only suggestion here is that you use people with similar lighting as the ones that you are using. These chairs here I also duplicated. I exported separately this table and chairs, so I could duplicate this to another instance to this area. And I added as well some trees. This one, it's one of the new trees from Lumion. I added here, and I added some. You see they are just basically floating here, but you don't notice this from the camera angle that I selected, and that's why it's important in the first part to select the camera angle that you are going to work on. So this way you just focus on exactly that area. So for example, here, I know that if I add some elements, let's say around here, it will be useless because I'm just wasting time on this area where it's not going to be visible to the camera, right? So I know that for this view, these elements add to the scene, so it doesn't really matter that they are here floating because you're not actually going to see that, okay? And here is the same. And also here I added one that you can see just a little bit of the tree branches. And again, here, of course, you wouldn't have the tree blocking the entrance, right? But in what I wanted here is just to see some of the branches in the final render. Another thing is that if you go here to nature, you'll find the section widths, And especially in this type of stones, you know, with at least this large grout here, you'll have a lot of these small weeds growing. So I scattered through this scene some of them, not too much, but some of them here and there, okay, just to have some variation. And finally, I added some trash bags and some some cardboard here on the floor, so just to give a little bit more life to the scene. And about the people, I will, if you notice in the final render, there is here real people. We'll get into that a little bit later in the video. And with this, let's actually move to the next part, which is render effects. So render effects. By the way, you can see that I have here a lot of different views. So I was trying this scene with a lot of different scenarios. So with ray tracing, you can quickly test a lot of different lighting, and pretty much all of them look quite good. But this one, it has, first of all, the ray tracing effect. And this ray tracing effect, I think for this scene, I left it with 512 samples, okay? But an exterior scene like this, you don't really need that much samples, to be honest, because there's a lot of noise from the textures. So you could easily get away even with 100 samples for this scene. And the render times will be much faster. The light bounces, I left it at 8, I enabled denoiser, and I made the firefly reduction to 0%. So the idea here is to reduce the most noise possible. Then we have here the two-point perspective, of course. The real skies, I already spoke about it. I left it at brightness 1.1. The overall brightness is just how bright the sky is. So if I decrease this, you'll see that there's no effect on the scene itself, just on the sky. If I increase, the sky becomes much brighter. For this scene, I think a value of 1 was a good value. And 1.1 for the scene itself, because if I increase, you'll see that the scene will become much more brighter and with a lot of blue from the sky, so I don't want that, so 1.1 was a good value. The sun, you already saw, I added in the same position and with a value of 0.7. And then I had some fog, so if I disable the fog, you can see it adds some depth here on this area, okay, just a little bit here. And by the way, this is another thing that you can see on the product roadmap. Right now you see a lot of noise, so it's a little bit difficult to see exactly what's going on. On the roadmap, you can see ray tracing real-time editor improvements. And so you can see here an image, how supposedly it will be. So it's another thing that they are working on, and hopefully they will get a release on this soon. And I added the precipitation effect because I just want to have some slight variation on my floor. So if I remove it, you'll see this area here. I don't want to have that wet floor effect. I just want to have some slight variation on the ground. Then I added the lens flare, and which has the bloom, and you can increase here the master brightness, how much do you want, so to you. And color correction, this is one of the most important effects now in the new Lumion, and I think many people neglect this effect. I like to leave the auto exposure off, and then I control here what I want. So if I click here to see the preview, actually let me just make this to 16 samples so it's faster. So let's make the preview, and you can already see here the histogram, okay? You can adjust here the value. For example, if I increase, right now it's 0.8, if I increase to almost the double, so you can see right now I'm getting already some of the highlights, and here the midtones are getting more to this level, to the center. But I think for this scene, the 0.8 was a good value. And you can also click here, toggle highlight clipping. See, it's clipping a little bit here, so it's not important, not a big deal. And here, shadows. So these shadows, you can see that it could be improved. You can either increase here, even here, the shadows. If you increase, and you'll see that it's starting to cover more area, or the exposure itself, you know. But again, for this scene, I think that sometimes you don't need to follow exactly these rules, and it's more to your own judgment. But this really helps to see exactly what's going on in the scene. And so it's pretty basic here. You see that I just increased the temperature because since it's a daytime scene, if you leave it at 0, I think it's way too cold, the scene right now. You see, it's with a lot of blue. And so this for me feels better. It looks right. And the contrast I left at 100, highlights 100, midtones 100, shadows 100, just reduced a little bit the gamma. And everything else is basically by default for this scene. Layer visibility, you can see that I have everything separated by layers, and which I recommend you to do because it will be much easier to work and to find things. So I have, for example, the street, the objects, I have the trees, separate, vegetation, people, fill lights, and cafe lighting. And also I have this people placeholder. And so this is some characters that I added here because I'm going to add some real people from a real photo. And to do this, if I just add them in Photoshop, I wouldn't know exactly in that exact position, in this exact position, what is that height. So I just add here some people, so I have a height reference. And that's why I have here these layers. And so I can just render one image without this people placeholder and another one with a people placeholder. And by the way, render always with the material ID because it will be useful to do this integration of real people. And next part is real people. So I already talked a little bit about this. There are several ways that you can do this, but I am using this technique. So as you saw, I have these people here as the placeholder for the height, and then I have this photo that I took with my phone. You can see that this scene is very similar to the one that I'm doing. And we have this person here, it's in shadow, this one is not. And then we have this one here. And so it's a little bit in front, this one's a little bit to the back. So what I did here is to cut these people in Photoshop. And you can do this in Photoshop several ways. And they actually, if I show you, so you can go here and even object selection. And I think it will do a very rough mask of this. So if you just select these ones, and then you can just simply go here with the polygon lasso tool and just start defining the areas a little bit better, you know, having these areas. So all of this and cutting the areas that you don't need. So of course, this is a longer process, and if you are interested in this full step-by-step tutorial just dedicated to this, let me know in the comments below. So when I do that, I then add these people to this scene like this. So let me just show you here. I have all of these layers, and as you saw, I have the render with the people. It's even with a lower resolution because I just wanted to have this reference for where the people are located. So when I have that, I start adding in the more or less the same height the people, as you can see here. These ones are here. Yeah, so you can see. So it was just for the height reference. So I'm just going to disable this one. And so we have first the people, then we have shadows. And how do I create these shadows? Just to duplicate the layer, pressing Ctrl J, and then I just went to perspective, to distort, and I just distorted this more or less like that. I wanted to keep the elements in the same position, and so it's better to do this more or less individual, but just to quickly show you how you can do this. And when you do that, you move this to the bottom layer, and you can make it first all black, you know, and from here you add some blur. So filter, you can add some lens blur or Gaussian blur, it depends on what you want to do. But let me just show you here what I did. I added this first one, which is basically, since the floor it's a little bit wet, I added this distortion. And to do this distortion, I just went to the smudge tool and just started doing like this. So it can, you see, it can have some smudge. And then I added the second one, which is the actual shadow that we just see from this part, right? Because the sun, it's in shadow here and here it's not. And then I used the hue and saturation to actually give it a little bit more color and lightness to the shadow. Then on this area, you see that I make it a little bit darker. Okay. And now the second shadow, actually, disable this one. The second shadow for this one, it's basically one that it's a little bit distorted here. Again, it's a little bit like a wet floor. Then we have these people here. So for these ones, I have some extra shadow just for the floor here, right under the feet. Then another one with a little bit more blur and less opacity. Then we have another one here and a last one. So you can see that this one, it makes just a little bit darker here, right where they are, and then it becomes a little bit lighter. Okay, and so this is the process of creating just this shadow. But there are other ways to do this, and it will be a little bit more complex, and it will make this video way too long. So again, if you want me to make the video dedicated just for this, let me know in the comments. And since we are here in Photoshop about post-production, what I did here is, first I duplicated the render and went to, let me just show you actually, duplicate this render and went to filter, other, and high pass. Give it a value of 1, it's enough. And then make it overlay. And so what this will make is, it will turn the image more sharp. So you can see the difference. Okay. And then I added curves adjustment. So it will make the whole image a little bit brighter. Okay, just adjusted here this medium value. Then I added some lens corrections. So these lens corrections, you can find them here in the lens correction, filter lens correction. Then I added here some flare. So it will just on this area to enhance a little bit more the lens flare, as you can see, just a little bit. And then color lookup, which is basically a LUT. So to give this to the whole scene, including already these people here, to integrate it even better, I added this LUT, so it's a color correction basically, and a little bit curve adjustment. So this is all it took for this post-production in Photoshop. If you are enjoying this breakdown video so far, don't forget to check out this video here that shows how I made this exterior in Lumion. And that's it for today. Don't forget to give the video a like, and I'll see you in the next one.